are the real life things. So, and then to measure your performance non-intrusively, we use cameras to see when the application launches and when it closes, and camera records everything for you. So, are you leveraging new technologies? Okay, then we already heard about the automation, but I go one step forward of tools, right? The tools that exist today, it can be code level or product level, or many things. They are not ordinary tools today. Without tools, you cannot exist. And that connects to the next T, which is the test life cycle time. Now the product shelf life has shrunk. Now the test development, the entire development life cycle has shrunk. Whether you use agile or standard or waterfall, whatever, it has shrunk. If you delay few days, it costs you millions and millions of dollars, and you may be out of business. How much are you ready? What kind of risks? You got to be a smart tester. You cannot test anything today. You must have heard me speaking in some other conferences about software debt and all those things, right? So, and by BT, there is a function-based testing, requirement-based testing. All new technologies, are you leveraging all those things? If not, then you will be in a old-fashioned testing where you are going to do everything which is not required, and you will be missing out things which are absolutely required. Okay, it's not just your functionality anymore. That is a must. But beyond that, you got to think in these 9 areas. Of course, not all these things are applicable to everything, right? But when you think about software, you got to look around this framework. Is it applicable to me? What is that? Where I am with that? And when I mentioned enterprise, I meant cloud also, which is a similar thing. Okay? All right, thank you. Sorry, I took longer than what I thought. There is one slide I have, the one picture that depicts everything. Maybe Unicom people will be able to share that someday if required.
We'll share it today.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you kind of put the, sorry, can you hear me? You kind of nailed the complexity that's coming in. We work with a lot of large enterprises, we work with startups, we work with product organizations. And one of the things, as you said, is the shrinking of timelines, right? Everybody is talking agile. Nobody talks projects of 8 months, 9 months. Everybody talks 3-week projects. Everybody talks 6 weeks release cycles. And that's what the world is coming to. Now let me give you another scenario where one, the process part about the shrinking timelines. The second part about the user experience. Everything is about user experience. And when let me change that user experience to include customer experience, right? Which is largely about your experience from a holistic perspective. Now let's take a scenario. You go to Airtel, you get, you want a connection, you get a connection, you don't get confirmation as to whether the service is enabled or not enabled. What do? You start calling up Airtel helplines or whichever service provider. I'm sorry if anybody from Airtel is here, apologies. But essentially you would call them, right? And what would you do? Your first thing is that, oh, you know what? I went, I gave all the forms, everybody said it would be enabled in 24 hours, nothing happened. And it's not that the process was bad or the technology was bad, it was just that the process was bad. Now when you look at testing, you're looking about that customer experience from a complete enablement perspective. That means from a network perspective, the service get enabled? Did the customer get informed? Was the customer given a good service? Because you don't give a good service, that's it. You're going to get cheesed off with Airtel. You probably walk to Vodafone now in these days of number portability. You would walk to a Vodafone or Tata Docomo, whoever. And when you talk customer experience, you're talking about not just the technology, but the process also that enables the entire thing. So when we as testers test, we need to figure out where in this entire life cycle our small bit of testing that we do is actually fitting in. And then are we covering for all of these other bits also? Right, so that's one portion. Now let me scare you with where I think the testing world is headed, okay? I do the scary talk very well, right? So imagine, right, tools. Now we're talking technology, right? Now tools are there which allow you to model test scenarios, right? Test requirements can be modeled. You get a set of requirements, you can create a set of test requirements, right? You create whatever combinations of positive, negative test requirements, model it, right? So you're designing there. You click a button, test cases get generated. You can import this into HP, QC, etc. Right? Test tools are evolving now that they give you even object references, etc. So imagine a small, nice framework that actually gets built, which will read these nice object references and be able to figure out what data that you want through data files that you will set up during the modeling, and be able to automate the tests at that point, right? So you have designed a set of test cases, you click a button, test cases get generated, or a set of test requirements, test cases get generated, object models get generated, some nice little framework comes along, picks up your object models, looks at the data, and automates your test for you. What do you as a tester do? Right? Everything is done. All you need to do is now focus really on the design part. So in terms of the shift that we as testers need to have is not really about, am I a good manual execution tester? Am I a good automation tester? It's about moving towards test design. And that's where the biggest challenge is going to be. Because if you're talking about shrinking test lines or shrinking timelines, the only way you can shrink it, because manual execution is the bulk of where you would spend a lot of time, right? If I can automate it while I'm designing it, why do I need manual testing? So everybody of you who are doing manual testing, watch out, because this world, and I believe there are tools that will do 80% of what I say right now. The 20% is coming in the next 2 or 3 years. And when it comes, it's going to hit us like a tidal wave, because everybody is going to adopt it and say, what is your experience? Manual testing. Well, sorry, can you design effectively? That's where I need people. Can you model test scenarios effectively? That's where I need people. And that's the shift that's going to happen. So this whole world of, you know, having a broad base of manual testers is now going to start shrinking, because obviously there are glass ceilings at every level, right? How many test designers do you need? Right? How many people does it take to design a test case? And that is where the shrink is going to happen. And that is where your competition is going to come from in terms of your capabilities or your abilities to effectively design. And I see this scenario rolling out in the next 2 or 3 years, right? Let's look at another part, which is the social media convergence. Everybody talks about big data and big data testing, right? Now, and let me link this back to customer experience. Now, when you look at how do you design effective test cases that promise that or predict the fact that your product will gain a better customer experience, right? So you go to social sites like a Mouth Shut or a Facebook or whatever it is that people complain about, right? You work with a Flipkart or a Myntra and things like that, and you're not happy with the way the site works, right? What do? You'll go out there and you might, if you're good, you might write to Flipkart about it, but most people aren't. That's a very small percentage who would write to Flipkart and said, you know what, I had a very bad experience using your site. What do you normally do? You will go up to Facebook, put a hash Flipkart, hash Myntra, and say, I had a super bad experience. Guys, watch out, don't ever go there, right? And that's what most people would do. Now, look at it another way. Can I actually garner social media inputs into my test design and make my test cases a lot more effective? So everybody talks about big data from a mining perspective and analytics perspective, etc., right? Can't this data be mined for an analytics which tell you how effectively you have tested? And that is where, if you put your mind to it, you should be able to look at it and say, you know what, 90% of my test cases are being crowdsourced. I just need to go to mouthshut.com or whatever xyz.com, look through the comments, and I have most of my test cases written out for me. And that is the way I see things moving forward, where social media is, and analytics is going to be playing a big part in terms of trying to take all the social chatter that is happening and be able to come back and say, here are a set of things that people are dissatisfied about. What are you, Mr. Tester or Miss Tester, Mrs. Tester, going to do about it, right? And design your test cases around that. Now that is where I think we need to change the way we start thinking about how we effectively design test cases, what channels and what inputs you use, because the rest of the stuff in terms of how it is automated, whether manual, that is a no-brainer. It's going to disappear sooner or later.
Good morning, everyone. I think Diwakar must have frightened you. Let me put some, it's not that bad at this point of time. Let me assure you of that as well. So I'm going to talk more from a business context in the first place and then look at what is coming up in the emerging areas. So I think testing has come a long way, actually. If you look at initially when products were released, there were a lot of defects, and Microsoft was one of the companies that they realized that testing needs to be of large, needs to be given a lot of focus. So they were the first to introduce 1:1 testing. So for one developer, one tester. And that was during the initial phase of how the industry evolved. And then if you look at right now, I think pretty much all organizations are spending at least about 30% of their time in testing. And if you look at some data point, this 30% that was currently was about 15 to 16%. So what's happening globally is that there is significant investment in testing that's happening across organizations. So that's good for us, actually. Let me also bring the India context. I think India is one that has benefited the most from this. If you look at currently from an offshoring or outsourcing market, India has 30% of the market share, significant enough, and this will only grow. There are three dimensions to it. One is the US and the European market, which is growing significantly. Second is the GICs or the captives that are being set up in India. So you see a lot of these corporations are being set up. You look at Goldman Sachs or Citibank, all of them have their centers based in India right now, and this is only going to grow. The third is with the new government coming up and the investments that is going to happen in India and the GDP growth that we're going to see, I think testing will also see significant growth from an India perspective. So I think it's going to be bright for all of us in terms of the near term and the future as well. But looking at some of the technology changes, for example, okay, yeah. Looking at what the technology changes, one of the things that is happening is the mobility, like what he discussed about. So all the mobile devices that we have, it is going to be connected, and we have something of Internet of Things. So there will be mobile devices, there will be your touch phones, there will be your video cameras, all of them connected to the internet. And that's where the new dimension of testing is going to come from. So one of the areas that we from KPMG see significant investment happening is in the mobility and the device anywhere kind of testing. So we see a lot of organizations investing in it. About 56% of organizations today, if they have standard application, they're moving it to the mobile. So you can, in fact, many of you will be using your timesheet or the business application sitting here, actually. So that's the shift that we are seeing, and companies are investing significant portion of their time in terms of testing of those. So we will see mobility as a short-term area that we will see good growth in the testing side, actually. So just to summarize, I think it's looking good for all of us, and it can only look better in the going forward, actually. Thank you.
Thanks, Prasanth. So now we have heard from what's next generation testing. Do you have any questions in front of? Please raise your hand. You'll get a mic, and kindly introduce yourself, your name and the company, and then ask your question. Yes.
Samsung. So my question is, when we're talking about next generation testing, it's also important to it's also important to discuss about the DFT, design for testability. So my question is, how far we feel is that design for testability is breakthrough is done, or what are the key challenges to do it more faster? What are the key challenges facing to make it more?
Okay, good question, Rakesh. Because we are completely focused on testing only, I talked about only those 9 parts. If I were to talk as a quality of the product, okay, test quality is generated. One of the things that generates quality is testing, not testing alone, right? Like this gentleman said about the customer experience, all those things. A lot of other things are required, right? Now, design for testability, it's absolutely necessary because somebody just talked about the shift left, okay? That is where it's going to add value. And it is, many companies have already started to generate the, of course, the age-old concept again, that early you detect, more you save, right? That's all comes under the same bucket. Now, many companies have started one new thing, right? It is related to quality, not necessarily to testing. See, why you see, the testing is not how many defects you find. Testing is how much quality you improved, how you prevented in the market something blowing up, right? That is what the testing is, not how many you found. Because if you look at only the defects data, then it can be an inefficient development team too, right? So let's not get there. Now, how do I ensure that the quality is great, right? That is done by today. What they're doing is, instead of, see, for example, there are, I cannot name the companies, but I do know that there are companies now, what they're doing is when they do campus hires for development, right? What they do is they bring in these development teams, freshers, and then they train them in the quality concepts, right? For example, static analysis, code reviews, unit tests, all these things. Same thing with design, right? Then they take the next level of the training to things like dynamic analysis.